Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for this Stand By What You Sell webinar, which is basically a partnership between Agriculture Victoria and Integrity Systems Company to help explain, updates on livestock production assurance, the eNVD, NLIS, and eID. So this webinar tonight is about covering all those things. So I'll just quickly go through the topics that we're going to cover tonight. My name's Cherie Young. I'm the Communications Manager here at Integrity Systems Company. So I'll be your facilitator tonight to take you through what we're going to cover. The first topic on our agenda is the Livestock Production Assurance Program. We've got Elizabeth Bradley, who's our Quality and Compliance Manager at Integrity Systems Company. She's going to take you through the requirements of that program. Then we're going to have an update on the eNVD, which I'll provide a little bit later on, and an update on the NLIS as well. Then we've got Agriculture Victoria's Ben Fahy with us tonight, and he's going to cover off some topics that he's issues around tagging and also property to property transfer details. Then we're going to bring in Scott Young, who's a sheep producer from Victoria, who's very involved in extending the use of his eID technology, and he's joining us tonight to take us through how using that technology has really come into force to benefit his business since he's taken that on. So that's the kind of flow of tonight. There's opportunities for you all to ask questions as we go through. There's a Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. We have representatives from AgVic and ISC working in the background answering all of your questions, so please put them in as they come to mind. The team will do their best to get to them. We have got quite a few of you here tonight, which is really great. So if we don't get to every question, we will get to it, and in the post-webinar email you'll get a recording link for this webinar, plus a transcript of all the questions and answers that have come up, and any helpful resources that you might be able to use relating to what we talk about tonight. So that's the kind of run of things. Before I pass over to Elizabeth, I just wanted to give you all a quick refresher on Integrity Systems Company and where we fit into the picture here. So we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia. And so together with MLA, we work to support and service the red meat industry in Australia. So our job in all of that is managing the animal welfare and assurance processes to ensure we have red meat that's safe to eat and is fully traceable. So we have two key programs that we manage. The first one is the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or the LPA, which you're going to hear about tonight, and also the National Livestock Identification System, or the NLIS. So with the LPA, that is the program that's all about your on-farm assurance, your food safety, animal welfare, and biosecurity. It's a tick of assurance which demonstrates the professionalism of our red meat industry, which ensures we continue to attract that market access. The other part of it is the NLIS, which is a mandatory program that is all about identification and traceability. So this allows us to track livestock, very important in the event of a disease or food safety incident, that we know where the livestock are. So underpinning both of these programs is the Property Identification Code System, the PICs. Now these are administered by your state and territory governments, and when that PIC is incorporated into the LPA system and the NLIS, we get a national traceability system that ensures our food safety is nationally managed. So it's really important. Now, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth, who's going to take you through LPA and give you some insight into all of those requirements. So I'll hand over. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie, and thanks for that good overview of LPA and NLIS. So as mentioned, I'm going to walk you through the requirements of LPA and how they translate into filling out your national vendor declarations and just how important all that is. I'm also going to talk about NLIS and animal identification as well, just to remind you about the requirements surrounding those ones. So to put it into context for you and just expand a bit of what Cherie said about market access. So approximately 70% on average across all different types of red meat in Australia actually gets exported out of the country. So when we talk about market access, it's really about getting our product overseas. And LPA and NLIS work together to give our trading partners that assurance that we're doing things that meet their requirements, and then find additional markets in order to export and continue to make all our money out of red meat. So we're focusing in on these because the assurance provided in these programs is really what they're chasing. So it ends up in your pocket at the end of the day as well. So tonight we're going to talk about the LPA requirements. I'll just start off with a general reminder about the program. So LPA accreditation, you can sign up once you have your PIC and you do your accreditation assessment and sign into the program. You need to renew that every 3 years to remain accredited and keep access to the LPA National Vendor Declarations and the eNVD if you're using electronic. You also need to make sure that you follow the LPA standards and have good records to back up your practices on farm and those declarations you make on your national vendor declarations. The other thing around LPA is that you can actually be selected for audit. So we do randomly pick producers every year for audit to verify that our assurance system is working and give our trading partners that assurance that it's working and everyone's doing the right thing. The other part is we can actually target you as well if we find out through various avenues about NVD completion or NLIS things to make sure that you're actually following up when maybe something gets slipped up. So tonight we'll run you through the 7 different elements within the standards. So there's 7 different elements that we talk to. There's 3 main categories though. So food safety being 3 of them. Then we talk about animal welfare, biosecurity, and also that livestock transactions and movements, which is all around your NLIS requirements and that NVD completion. So without further ado, the first requirement in LPA really speaks to food safety, and it's about your property and how your property might contaminate livestock and what you can do to minimise that risk of contamination. So when we talk about property risk assessments, I know it can sound a bit scary doing a risk assessment. I don't know how to do it. It's not supposed to be hard. It's quite simple when you bring it right down to the bare bones. So the first thing is to have a look at your property and identify anything that might cause contamination to your livestock. So we're talking about chemicals. It could be something that might injure them, and just identifying them and noting them down on your farm map and potentially just a piece of paper to start with. The next part of the property risk assessment requirement in LPA is to document how you're going to control or minimise that contamination risk for your livestock. So it can be as simple as just fencing off an area or excluding livestock from that, or potentially it could be removing it from the property if it's something you can remove. The third part of the property risk assessment is around if livestock are contaminated or do become exposed to a contaminant, how you identify and manage those livestock so that when you do sell them off or move them on, you can actually declare that contamination on the NVD if you require. So when we talk about contamination risks, it's things like old dip sites, it's also batteries, rubbish tips, things of that nature, or things that could injure livestock, such as broken fences, where wire maybe can get lodged in their tissues. So it's general stuff that you're probably doing already, and it's just about documenting that and having a good system in place to reduce that contamination risk. The second element in LPA also speaks to food safety. It does have a lens in animal welfare as well. So it's around safe and responsible animal treatment. So the first part of this being is that we want to make sure that any treatment that we're administering to our livestock is going to be effective at doing what it should. So whether it's preventative or treating something, we want to make sure that that dose is actually going to do what it's supposed to. And how we do that is making sure we're using, storing, discarding our treatments properly, and also keeping good records, really good records around the treatments we administer. So making sure we have full, what we've treated, when, batch numbers, expiry dates, dose rates, especially with holding periods or export slaughter intervals, to make sure that, again, if we're selling our livestock and they're in a withholding period, we can declare that and have a good record to back up what we're putting on that NVD if we're selling our livestock. Other things around animal treatments is if there's broken needle risk, making sure that we can identify those livestock as well, because the needles can remain in the meat tissue. If you're unsure or you don't know about withholding periods and export slaughter intervals, you can access them from the APBMA. So yeah, following that advice as well is really important here, and making sure you're getting approvals for off-label use of drugs. Yeah, top tip here is just keep really good records, because it'll protect you as much as it does the animals. So the third requirement in LPA is, again, with a food safety lens. It lends itself very similarly to animal treatments, but this time it's all around what livestock eat and might be exposed to on the farm as well. So this one's around stock foods, pasture treatments, or potentially import feed that you might be bringing onto your property. It lends itself again to chemical treatments that you might be applying or having contractors apply to sprays, treatments like that. And again, it's all around keeping good records, storing chemicals away from livestock, disposing of them properly. And records, again, are your protection, so that you know exactly if you've accidentally exposed livestock to graze in a paddock that might have been in withholding period, that can actually transfer a residue into that animal. So we need to make sure we're declaring that on that NVD, or holding back those livestock until they're out of that withholding period and are safe for sale for food safety reasons. Things also around chemical use is making sure any people that are doing so are adequately trained. So common example is the ChemCert certificate, so that the responsible use of chemicals is there. Other things you can do is when you're buying in feed for livestock, is to get copies of commodity vendor declarations or assurances from your people, from the person you're buying that food off, that it hasn't been treated with a chemical, or if it has, that you're aware of its withholding period, so you can manage that risk contamination for your livestock as well. The fourth element of LPA is all around preparing livestock for dispatch. This has, I would say, both a food safety and definitely an animal welfare requirement here. So it's all around making sure that animals are fit for the intended journey, and that you're doing your fit to load checks on animals before they're getting on to transport vehicles. Filling out your NVDs and doing that check is part of this requirement, and having access to the MLA's fit to load guide is a really good way to have a resource to understand what is fit to load and what's not. This one has an animal welfare requirement. You know, we don't want animals stressed or injured or unable to make that journey to be loaded for transport. And similarly, curfews and that sort of thing is also important here to manage the effluent contamination as well. So the next requirement we'll talk about is biosecurity. So biosecurity's been rather important in the last 12 months, especially with the foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease being in Indonesia. So within LPA, there's a requirement that producers have a documented biosecurity plan in place, which basically covers how you'll manage the risk of diseases, weeds and pests entering and establishing onto your property. It looks at things like how you control people, equipment, feed, things coming onto your property and bringing with them that contamination risk. It's all about what's reasonable and what's practical and what you can control. So it's most likely things you're doing already. So fencing, signage, having closed gates, feral management of feral animal management, and good monitoring of your livestock and your property as well to pick up issues early. So remaining vigilant with that monitoring is really important, especially if something's happened and you weren't able to control it, to keep an eye on that area and make sure that you can report it as soon as you see an issue. The other important thing around biosecurity is management of introduced livestock. So if you regularly buy in stock onto your property, managing that risk. So getting health declarations, keeping them in quarantine until they've emptied out or you've satisfied they don't have a disease is also really important around that biosecurity. Another thing to note quickly on biosecurity, we do have LPA templates available in your LPA account that you can fill out online if you wanted to do a biosecurity plan and you haven't done so. We also have different versions of the template, so Word, Excel, PDF, whatever version you like. We will accept any type of biosecurity plan in LPA, so long as it's covering all your risks. So don't be shy, there's lots of resources and help out there, including some videos and previous webinars as well on this one. So the seventh element in LPA is animal welfare. So animal welfare talks about adherence to the Australian animal welfare standards and guidelines, which are nationally agreed. And it talks about having access to these guidelines and having an understanding of them, so reading them and having an access to them. It's also about completing some relevant training in these. So we offer LPA animal welfare training as part of your LPA accreditation. It's available on our website and in your LPA account as well, so you can complete that module as many times as you like, and you can put your staff through it as well, which is really great. And you can complete that regularly if you need to as well as that training record, because that's also a requirement. So where you have staff that are doing animal husbandry practices, having good records for their training and awareness of these standards is also really important as well. So the last requirement around LPA is it's actually number 5 in the LPA standards, but we'll talk about it last here because it kind of links into NLIS, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But livestock transactions and movements is all around completing your NVDs. So for LPA, you need to complete an NVD every time livestock are moved off your property or your pick, and you need to get a copy of an NVD every time you buy livestock in. So it's that transaction record of leaving and coming. You also need to make sure that animals are identified with an NLIS accredited device before leaving your property, and you also need to complete the NLIS transfers in the NLIS database within 2 days of livestock arriving onto your property. Keeping good records of your sales and movements also helps with this. And this is where all your records from your treatments and your feeding and your property risk all feed into how you answer the questions on those NVDs. So completing NVDs is actually a legal requirement, and it is a legal declaration as well. So it's really important that you answer all of the questions, that all of the parts of it are filled out properly. Otherwise, it can actually become an invalid document. And this is really hard for the person receiving those livestock on that NVD, because they don't have all the information about those livestock. So not being able to read them, having questions answered both yes and no, them not being signed, it all makes it an invalid NVD, which is a really big struggle. We do have the electronic version, which actually helps mitigate a lot of these issues we have with the paper NVDs at the moment. And it actually gives us real-time information on the consignments, which actually helps with tracing. So I'm going to hand back to Cherie, who's going to run you through the benefits of eNVD and our new eNVD mobile app. So I can have a break and Cherie will take you through that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, so I guess Elizabeth's just given me a great segue into this, but so why is transitioning to digital consignments so important? I think the first place to start, and Elizabeth has touched on it, is the challenges that we have with paper forms. So yes, quite a few issues there coming through with paper forms, mainly around just the time it takes for that changes to the NVD take place. It takes quite a bit of time for those changes to flow through. This means you end up sometimes with out-of-date books and accidentally completing out-of-date NVDs, which is also an issue. Then there's the paper forms themselves are very susceptible to getting lost, damaged, or misfiled away, and they're hard to track down. They also can be very hard to read for people as they go through the supply chain. It's data entry, it's hard to read, so there's a lot of opportunities there for errors. And information can also get filled in incorrectly along the way as well. So you've got a lot of issues around the paper forms. So then you get duplication as well. So there's a lot of times where you end up filling in the same declarations over and over again. So that takes time and energy as well, and just inefficiencies, creating a lot of inefficiencies through the entire supply chain, which does also undermine the robustness of our integrity system, so which underpins our exports. So there is a lot sort of riding on shifting over to digital consignments, and so to try and expedite that, Integrity Systems Company launched the web-based eNVD system in 2018. It's a voluntary system for LPA accredited producers to handle digital consignments and complete livestock assurance documentation and health declarations online. So there are benefits to this system, easy to read, the forms don't get lost or damaged, it reduces duplication in the completing process, and it's just a more efficient way of retaining that information in a digital sense. It's also easier when it comes around to being audited for LPA, because you've got all your forms in the one place, and it makes it easier for the auditor to go through everything. But like with many things, there was issues, and no internet was the biggest one that was impacting the ability for this solution to provide an end-to-end digital transfer environment for consignments. So ISC went away again and came back with the eNVD mobile app, which was launched in March this year. It has an offline functionality, which is one of the key points of it, which means producers can, you can start a consignment at home in your office, finish it down at the yards, even if there's no internet available, and your transporter, providing they're using it, turns up, and you can transfer that data to them, and that can just transfer through the supply chain. So that's the way where we're headed. We're just now in a process of getting the rest of the supply chain on board with this process. But so far, since the app was launched, we've had over 15,000 downloads of the app, and every month the use of it is going up and up and up, which is really, really good. So as I explained, it has this QR code technology built into it that transfers the data. It also has a templates function that reduces the amount of duplication that you might need to do if you're filling in paper forms. So it sort of auto-fills. If you have regular consignments, you can just kind of reuse that template and save yourself some time there. Adoption activities, ISC's digital adoption team have been out in the field for the last 18 months, working with all the different parts of the supply chain to try and get them to be digital ready and able to take this app. So we've, that's processors, feedlots, transporters, agents, sale yards, the whole gamut. And it is a big change, and it is a lot of changes in the way of working. So we understand that it is a big change, and that's why we're trying to provide as much help and resources as we can. And the adoption team's certainly there to help with any, issues, that might come up. But I guess our biggest takeout is that we're just asking you to check with your receiver before you send a digital consignment. It's just really important that you check in with your transporter and your receiver to make sure that they're digital ready to receive a consignment in this way. And if they aren't, and they do need the paper, you can print it out from your computer or your phone, and you can also email it as a PDF to your transporter or the next step in your process. So there is that availability there. Even though you might think, oh, well, what's the point of having to then print it out? It still means that data is held in a digital sense. So there is still benefit for the supply chain of it being there. And it's also just important to remember that even if you're doing this digitally through the app or the web, you still also need to go into the NLIS if you're receiving stock and lodge that there as well. So there is still that two-step process at the moment. But yeah, work is continuing. We're very happy to get feedback on this and build that in. We've got a lot of our tech teams, working really hard to bring the web and the app into alignment with each other as well. So there's a lot more complementary activities across those two platforms. So yeah, we'd love your feedback. So keep it coming. But yeah, that's basically where we're at with that. I think I'll hand back to, before I go, resources. As I mentioned, we have quite a few. There's a website there that you can download lots of helpful resources and how to use the app. And there's also customer service, only too happy to help as well if you call that number. So with that, I'll go back to Elizabeth because she's got a little bit more to talk to you about NLIS before we hear from Ben and Scott. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Cherie. So yes, I'm going to now talk about NLIS and the requirements around that for producers in particular. So NLIS and LPA fit together, as we mentioned. So when you actually complete a transfer in NLIS, you can actually record that NVD number, or the eNVD can actually be, connected to it. So it's really important that they're completed properly, because and that serial number is actually included in that upload. So for the NLIS, though, it is required in LPA that you complete the animal identification requirements and those movements. The NLIS is a legal requirement. So while LPA is technically voluntary, in that you don't have to be an LPA, you do have to be if you want to use the LPA NVD. You don't have to be otherwise. You are legally required under legislation to follow the NLIS requirements. So that includes having a PIC. Also ensuring that livestock are identified with an accredited device, and that you're recording those livestock movements in the NLIS database within that 2-day time frame. So I'm just going to give you a quick reminder. So as Cherie mentioned right at the start of the webinar, PICs form the basis of the NLIS. So they're the identification of locations within the database, and they're issued by and controlled by the state government. So if you need to sell a property or you're moving or leasing, you need to contact your state department to make sure you have an active PIC, because that starts the whole process off. The next part of NLIS is animal identification. So IOC credits these devices, and in Victoria you buy them through the Agriculture Victoria tag room. So accredited devices have an NLIS logo printed on them, and in Victoria there's only electronic, and it's one tag per animal. So that's so that the animal's identified with one, and that ID stays with it for its lifetime, so we can trace individual animals. In cattle, that tag goes in the right ear, and in sheep and goats it can be in either. The year of birth colour exists for sheep and goats, so that's for when you're applying a tag or ordering them. You can use the year of birth colour if you like, or yellow is the default, to apply tags of that colour to animals born on your property. So that's called a breeder tag. In cattle, that's a white tag. In sheep and goats, it could be the year of birth. The other type of tag you can have is something we call a post-breeder tag, which applies when the animal you're tagging wasn't born on your property. So with cattle, that's an orange tag, and with sheep and goats, it's actually a pink tag as well. So there's just some basic 101s around tagging and animal identification. Application instructions are really, really important when applying tags, because each tag is slightly different. It's important that you're using the right applicator, and that the applicator is working properly. Sometimes the pins get a little bit worn out, so you need to check those before you actually put the tags in. And again, make sure you follow those applications instructions really carefully, because that can really lead to issues with retention if they're not applied correctly. I will talk about the electronic identification devices, which is what's used in Victoria now. So the eIDs are different to a visual only tag, because they have a little microchip in them that transmits a number when they're scanned with a reader. So the number inside in that microchip is called an RFID number, and it's a 16-digit number that's unique, and the manufacturer you buy that off, or who makes that tag, will actually create that number. The second number that is associated with an eID is called a visual number, which gets printed on the outside of the tags, and we term it an NLIS ID. I always get that a bit mixed up. And so that contains, when you order it, your PIC. It'll have your PIC so that we know that it's been issued to you. It also has a letter number, a letter for the manufacturer. It also has a letter to indicate if it's a breeder tag or a post-breeder tag, and for which species you're ordering. So it's important to always apply cattle tags to cattle, and sheep tags to sheep, and goat tags to goats. The next letter in that sequence for that visual number is the year it was made, and there's 5 digits for a serial number to make sure that that number is also unique as well. So what happens when you order the tags, the manufacturer will basically associate those two numbers together as that tag, and they'll upload the full list of those tag numbers to the NLIS database, and they get registered against your pick. So when you buy, say, 100 tags, the manufacturer will add them to your pick and then physically send you those tags for use. So that's how they get onto the database in the first place and sit there as active tags ready for you to use. The next part of the NLIS is recording those movements in the database. So you've got your tags, you've added them to your animals and you've sold them. So now the person that you sold those animals to needs to record that movement that you've moved those animals to their pick in the database. So they would scan those animals and use the scanner to get those tag numbers and then use those tag numbers to move them from your pick onto their pick. And that starts the traceability train. Some key points around livestock movements in the NLIS database. So within 2 days of that movement occurring, it is the legal responsibility of the person who receives livestock to do that transfer. If you're selling livestock or sending them, you don't have to do that transfer. You're not legally responsible for doing so, but you can do it. The function does exist in the database to do that if you have the tag numbers. If you're selling to a sale yard, a feedlot, an abattoir, they'll do that transfer because they're the one receiving those animals. If you're using an agent or a third party to do transfers for you because you don't have a scanner maybe, that's fine. Just make sure that you're checking with them that they have actually done it. So you can request an upload ID from them, which is a confirmation that that transfer's happened. Or if and this is what I would recommend, get an NLIS account. It's free and you can do it yourself online. You can actually check to see movements on and off your own pick. So you can have that assurance there that those movements have actually happened. And that's really important, especially when you're selling to other producers, which is what we call property to property transfers. And that sort of brings me to the end of my talk about NLIS. And it's a nice segue into introducing Ben Fahy from Agriculture Victoria, who's here to talk to you about things like property to property transfers in Victoria. So Ben, I'll stop talking now and hand over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Much appreciated. And thanks for the opportunity. Great to see so many producers and supply chain participants on the webinar. I was just going to go through some of the areas that we see, certainly in AgVic, as we've introduced since 2017, the mandatory requirement for electronic identification tags in sheep and goats. And obviously, we continue to see excellent support and efforts being made right across the supply chain, from producers through to agents, sale yards, and abattoirs in scanning tags and ensuring transfers are done correctly. And we see millions of tags go through both abattoirs and sale yards each year, as well as upwards of 11 million tags ordered per year by producers as well. So it's great to see all of the effort that the whole supply chain is putting into it. Some of the areas that probably we would like to see some further improvement on are just some of the tagging side of things. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So some of the issues that we tend to see causing problems further down the supply chain, especially in sale yards, but also in abattoirs, is that incorrect tagging of livestock. And there's two parts of the incorrect tagging. There's failure to use an electronic NLIS sheep tag. Since January 2022, all sheep coming off of Victorian property must have an electronic tag in their area, regardless of where they originated from. So that includes our interstate sheep that are coming in and most likely coming in with a visual tag. They're required to have a electronic tag in their ear before they're dispatched off the Victorian property. And one of the important parts that we see with that is if producers are able to do that, it certainly helps further down the supply chain. We see when we go and do audits in sale yards and abattoirs that not having tags in ears or only having visual tags in ears affects the agents at sale yards. They have to then put post-breeder tags in those animals before they can auction them and sell them, before they can move on. It affects sale yards obviously because they need to manage the supply of those post-breeder tags, and it also affects the abattoirs in receiving livestock that don't have a tag, and they need to ensure they're able to satisfy the requirements to prove they know the last property of origin before they're processed. So the integrity in the system is important for every supply chain participant, and so having a tag in the ear and the correct tag in the ear is really important. One of the other areas we're seeing when we see sheep go through the supply chain is electronic tags being used, but just incorrect placement in there. So we're asking that producers really follow the manufacturer's instructions that come with those tags, and ensure that they put those tags in the correct placement in the ear to ensure that tag stays with the animal for life, and we don't see them being lost en route to other properties, to sayards, or to abattoirs. If we go to the next slide, please. The other area that we would like to see some improvement in, albeit we do see quite a large number of property transfers occurring for sheep and goats moving into Victorian properties, is just a reminder to ensure that they are completed. The fact that you've received a vendor declaration from the seller or the person you purchase those animals from doesn't equate to doing property transfers. And as Victoria has mandatory use of electronic tags, there needs to be a scan of the animals that are being introduced, and then that scan file, along with the property identification code, the PIC off the NVD that accompanied those animals, is entered onto the NLIS database, as Elizabeth covered before. And so it's important that we see that occur within 2 days of the arrival of the sheep coming onto a Victorian property. Again, it's important not only for government, and it's a regulatory requirement, but it's obviously important for industry and also for our trading partners to have confidence that the animals that are located on properties are accurately recorded on the NLIS database, and if needs be, we can quickly trace those movements and either manage disease or food safety incidents, depending on what the issue may be. So yeah, just a reminder to ensure tags are correct and all sheep are tagged, and ensure that you've done a property transfer. And importantly, that also includes online trading platforms and sheep that are arriving for agistment. So the ownership may not change. They might just be placed on a property for a short period of time, but there needs to be an NVD accompanying those animals and a transfer done. I'll leave it there. Thank you. And I think we're handing back to Cherie.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Ben. That was great. Yes, so moving into the next part of our presentation tonight, we're going to introduce Scott Young to the webinar. Scott is an innovative third-generation prime lamb and grain farmer from Fernley Park in Ballon, Victoria. Scott embraces technology and is a passionate voice for the agricultural industry as president of the VFF Livestock Group. And Scott is here tonight to talk about how he is extending his use of eID for greater benefit for his business. So thank you very much for joining us, Scott. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be on. Thanks for the opportunity, Cherie.
No problems at all. Look, I guess I just have a few questions that we're going to go through. And so I guess the first cab off the rank is, what are the key benefits that you're finding of using eID for you?
I think that key benefit just comes back to that individual animal traceability, whether it be for my prime lamb operation or for a wool operation, being able to use that data that I collect and improve my business. You know, also what we've seen in Victoria is by being able to trace that individual animal, we can get up to 99% traceability within the system. So it's great to see from that biosecurity traceability that as Victorian producers, we're right at the top of the list of how good we are at being able to trace those animals.
Yeah, that's incredible. 99%. I think that's a pretty good advertisement for it for the rest of the country. They'll be eagerly watching this webinar once we get it distributed out there for sure. I just wondered as well, can you share a couple of examples with us about how using eID is benefiting the production side of your business?
Yeah, as I touched on briefly a minute ago, the benefits I've found gradually over time is, the ability to identify those higher performing animals, the better genetics within my flock that previously I wouldn't have been able to monitor, or would have been a lot harder to monitor as a commercial breeder, not a stud breeder. So being able to, manage my single twin dry lambs, being able to track them over years and identify those higher performing animals, being able to manage the weight in my prime lambs as they're growing, and being able to take out forward contracts, and knowing with, some pretty, high certainty that I've noticed in the last couple of years of, as they're going through their growth during the springtime, being able to estimate within a week or two of what weights they're going to get to, and being able to forward market them and hopefully hit some good contract prices and benefit my business. Also being able to look back at the treatments that I've given my animals over time, and manage drench rotations, withholding periods, all these things on the system. I use True Test system, and these alerts come up as the animals go through my handler that they're still within withholding periods, and I can make sure that I'm not sending animals to market that are within those withholding periods.
Excellent. Right. So basically you can use that data that you're getting to show you all these different pieces of information that can help you plan out, what you're doing next, basically.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I'm by no means at the top of the tree as far as producers go. I've still got a long way to go. But I have realised that, it's in using that data, I've also got an automatic drench gun now that also allows me to drench those animals to a specific weight range, and then having those records in my system makes that system a lot greater, and being able to for that lifetime traceability of that animal. And like I said, the key for me has been the markets and the genetic advances that I've been able to make over time.
Fantastic. So good. Okay, now I guess with anything, there's always challenges. So I was wondering if you could give us a bit of an insight into how you've overcome any challenges that you might have faced sort of when implementing eID. And
I had to think about this a little bit, because it's obviously been over quite a bit of time, and I think I've just adjusted to those challenges as they've come along. I was quite surprised. I thought we might have had issues with tag retention rates and failure of the actual eID tags, but quite surprised that this hasn't been an issue at all. And with the system, as they go through my handler, it automatically it won't let the animal go through the handler unless the eID has been read. So straight away, if there is a tag in the animal and it's not reading that, I know that I need to replace that tag. Obviously, data is key with what we've been gathering now, and being able to manage that data has been one of the challenges, and knowing what data is valuable to my business and what data I perhaps don't need to worry about. So that's a challenge, and that's one of my challenges going forward. The challenge of uploading your stock onto that NLIS system for people, that was a challenge for a start. And I'm fortunate enough that through the system I'm using now, and I'm only using the Datamars app that comes with my True Test weigh equipment, but once my animals are scanned now, I can just download that onto my phone. I press a button at the bottom of the Datamars app, fill in a a form, and that automatically uploads all that information and those animals onto my system when I purchased animals off another pick. So it's made it really easy and really simple to do. So yeah, for a start, that was a struggle when I was doing it myself, and it wasn't going through a livestock agent. But yeah, the technology is getting there, and I can see as more and more producers throughout Australia come onto it, a lot of these companies will be coming out with a lot better technology and making it a lot easier. I was chatting to the guys from Gallagher the other week, and they're working on some really simple screens that are really user friendly for farmers, because they can see that there's a lot of people that are going to come into this system that haven't got the technology skills that a lot of others have. And I do rely on my farm worker, Summer, a lot. She does a lot of the technology for me. But yeah, so industry has realised that and are going to be working towards that.
Very good. Yeah, so I guess next, that's sort of leading me into, now that we've got a national rollout of this taking place, can you share any insights into the further possibilities you see flowing from a national rollout of eID?
Yeah, well, obviously that unified system across Australia, so that all of our animals are tagged, it will ensure that those interstate animals coming into Victoria are going to be tagged. It'll help us with our export markets as we open up those new markets overseas. They want to know that traceability of the product. And like I said earlier, that 99% traceability, that's that key, that's that marketability that we're going to have and show that traceability throughout our system. Some other things is potentially hook tracking through the system, through the processor system, which will be great for producers. So I've had a chat to a few of the processors and also our customers, and once we get to that national system, they can see that hook tracking is that next step. So once we get there, then we'll be able to get that individual animal feedback. We'll be able to look at health issues within our flock, and we'll also be able to get that extra genetic gain, because we'll be able to see how those higher weight gain animals are actually going through and processing it at the other end as well. And that's going to be great. I can see the whole industry having a leap forward once all of Australia's adopted eID and gone that way and using the genetics to move forward.
Certainly going to be I know it's going to be a big change for a lot of producers in the other states in Australia, but you can see the benefits of it. And yeah, you just got to keep going back to that 99% figure is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I think, the producers in the other states, Victoria didn't get there overnight. We've got there gradually, and obviously a lot of producers that are on tonight from Victoria are already doing everything that I've been talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it will get there gradually. Tags in the ear is the first step, and then the rest of it will come along gradually. So, and I'm sure, as I've said, those manufacturers of the readers and weigh scales, etc., will be bringing the producers along and educating them along the way. As they want to make.
Kind of leads me to a question. I think I meant to ask it a couple before, so sorry if I've gotten a bit out of order here, Scott. It's just about the infrastructure. Now, obviously, there's, I guess the sky's the limit in terms of what sort of infrastructure you need to get going. And I guess in Victoria, there's a real variety out there of where people are at. And I get the feeling you've extended your use of it. So I was just, wondering if you could just sort of take us through infrastructure and what you need to get going, and where you can go if you really want to take it to the next step.
As I was sort of mentioned, that we started off with the stick reader just to read basic tag numbers, but I already had a sheep handler in our system on our farm, so A panel reader was the next purchase onto the sheep handler. So all this was done over time. I didn't go out and spend all this money and do it all straight away. Then I realised I wanted to capture a little bit more data, so we upgraded our scale indicator, and that's given us a lot more benefits as being able to monitor a lot more of our inputs and being able to, like I said earlier, track our drenches, withholding periods, batch numbers, all those key things. So we've already got those on record in the scale indicator, and every animal's got what they've been dosed with against their tag number. Then we went to an auto drench gun, which has saved me a huge amount of money, being able to drench those animals the exact weight they're at. And next, as I mentioned earlier, is farm software. That's the next big one. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a big variety there in what you need, and I guess for I know we've got Victorians on this audience tonight, but I have a feeling this webinar may get played out to other states. So just wondering if you had any advice or thoughts that you could pass on to the other producers around the country that might be are obviously needing to get started with this. What would any advice you'd give them?
Start off with tags in ears. That's number one. We need all the animals tagged. And then I think have a talk to some of the software companies and the companies who are have got the indicators and the tag readers, and have a chat to them about what they've got that might suit your operation, and then step in at a price point that's comfortable for you as well, and have a think about potentially what you might like to do with your business and where you'd like to take that data in the future. So if you're a prime lamb operation, or if you're a wool operation, what data you want to capture and where you want to take that in the future. So have a bit of a think about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think is there anything you think we've missed, Scott, that we could pass on while we've got everyone here?
No, I'd just like to encourage everybody to have a go at the new eNVD app. I reckon, it's a great way moving forward. I know it may not be perfect at the moment, and encourage any producers as they have a go at it to give some feedback, and so that we can make it usable for everybody and get that uptake within the industry.
Oh, thank you, Scott. That's lovely. Great to hear you talk about the app, and yes, we're definitely very keen on seeing it used as much as possible, and the feedback, yes, we definitely want that to keep coming as well, because Scott is right. With that feedback, we can help shape it in the way it needs to be. So I think we've got a few questions coming in to the Q&A still, but I think that almost brings us to an end of our formalities tonight. I've just got some resources there, contact details, if you need to get in touch with us at all. I would just like to say thank you to everyone who's attended tonight, and we've got a survey that's just popped up in the Q&A for you to fill in. It'd be great if you could. I'd like to also thank everyone who worked hard to bring this webinar on board tonight. Thanks to Ben Fahy for joining us. Thank you very much to Scott Young. Elizabeth did a great job with the LPA coverage. Got George Basher and Callum and Romy in the background answering questions for ISC, and also Ben and Kate from AgVic, and Bridget, as always. Look, thanks very much. I hope you all got something out of this. We will be getting back in touch with you with the post-webinar email with all the information you've heard about tonight. So keep your eye out for that. And yes, thank you.